This will be the November 16th meeting of the Mayor and City Council of Roswell. I'd like to welcome everyone here. I understand we have a former Boy Scout in the room who's going to lead us in the pledge, Vance Smith. If we'd all stand and face the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to call upon Councilmember Becky Wynn to recognize our Transportation Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening we would like to, we're very privileged tonight to be able to recognize our Transportation Department for receiving the 2009 Design Award for Context Sensitivity Design and Public Participation on the Old Roswell Road West Side Parkway Design Project. And I think you want to go ahead and recognize Mr. Brandon Beach, who is our district representative at GDOT, and Mr. Vance Smith, who is the commissioner. And I'm sorry, Mr. Spears of GDOT. Mr. Asenbrecht.
Thank you, Councilwoman Wynn. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight is indeed an honor. It's a very special night for the City of Roswell. The City of Roswell and its design firm, Raju Shah, come on, Raju, are very fortunate to be the recipients of a GDOT 2009 Design Award. This award is being presented to the City Council and the Mayor for Westside Parkway in the category of context-sensitive design and public participation. And that is a nod to some former council members that I've been working with now for several years on the importance of making sure that these designs meet all the needs of the city and have the outreach that they need in order to win the public support. And it is nice to be being recognized for that. For your information, on Thursday, November 15th, there was a Georgia Transportation Summit down at the Georgia World Congress Center, attended by a number of distinguished citizens and design firms and folks from the Georgia Department of Transportation. We had an awards lunch, and prior to that meeting, Raju Shah had called me and said that there were going to be some awards given out and suggested we go after one of them. We did, and we were very fortunate to have won this award. At the time, the awards were called out. Raju Shah was called forward by the Chief Engineer Gerald Ross and accepted the award, and I was there and accepted the award on behalf of you, the Mayor and the City Council. But it is my great honor to introduce the Commissioner of Transportation, Mr. Vance Smith, and of course our local GDOT board member Brandon Beach, who we know so well. So I'd like to ask them to come forward at this time.
While Brandon is coming forward, I want to recognize Brandon not just for his role with the GDOT board, but for his role with the CID and formerly his role with the City of Alpharetta. This was a joint project with GDOT, the CID, which is the North Point CID. It's the Community Improvement District, North Fulton Community Improvement District, the City of Alpharetta, and actually Congressman Price was a big part of this thing too. He got us a key grant to get this, and we're now glad to have Dr. Betty Price is on our council. So this was a partnership, and I want to share the credit for this with not just with Rajiv Shah and our Transportation Department and the City Council, but with all of the partners, because they all were instrumental in making this happen, and it's a great project for all of North Fulton County. And with that, I'll pass it back to Vance. And Vance, I first want to say we're excited to have you as head of GDOT. As I said, in 2 years we expect to have all the problems solved and the streets running smoothly, but you're the right guy to do it.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor and City Council, and I appreciate the opportunity to come up and be here with you all and present this great award to you and your partnership with the City of Alpharetta, the North Fulton CID, and thanks to my employer, Mr. Brandon Beach, who I enjoy working for, he and the other 12 members of the board. It's a delight to be here to represent GDOT along with David Spear, who's in communication. We just thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to presenting this plaque to you when you're ready. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Brandon, any additional words?
No, I would like to thank the city of Roswell for all their hard work in it. I tell you, I was telling Stu, we had meetings at the chamber every week, and we fed everybody lunch. We'd have the city of Roswell, the city of Alpharetta, the CID, Georgia Power. If it was a utility question, we'd have everybody in there, and we bought them lunch. The CID paid for the lunch, and it really helped because everybody.
You never invited me, Brandon.
Well, but we had Raju there, and we would have a to-do list, and we would stay on track, and it really kept us on track. And I want to say also that this opening of this road, it's great for public safety also. I was talking to both chiefs and just said it's really going to be nice once we open that intersection right there by the Land Rover dealership, and that's ahead of schedule. By contract, I think it has to be open by April 1st, but I think we're ahead of schedule in talking to C.W. Matthews. But it was a great ribbon cutting. The mayor was over there on his motor scooter and scooted down. We opened it up, and we had a UPS truck drive down, and you led the UPS truck down the way when we opened West Side Parkway.
Shameless sponsor.
About a month, but anyway, it was a great deal. It was a great collaboration of all the entities, and congratulations to the city of Roswell, and thank you for all y'all do.
Let's have a hand for everybody who made this possible. And Vance, with your permission, my council would love to have their picture taken with you and Brandon.
That's my honor. My honor, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Right.
I want you up here. The lighting is better.
We hope to get lots more of these next year. We're going to try to get lots more.
Okay, right here. Here we go. 1, 2.
Motion by Councilmember Wynn to approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Is there anyone in the audience who has any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time I will call upon Transportation Department. We've already reached her. Councilmember Jerry Orleans with the Recreation and Parks Department.
Tonight we have the second reading of an approval of an ordinance to completely ban smoking within the city of Roswell Parks. The city attorney can do the reading.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to ban smoking within the city of Roswell Parks. Now, therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. Section 14.2.4K of the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances is hereby amended by striking it entirely and substituting the following section in its place, the text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the second reading of the ordinance.
I just wanted to mention two things in the ordinance itself. is the key issues, I guess, associating with the secondhand smoke, and then the other part of it being the parks being there to enhance their health and wellness through leisure opportunities, and smoking is detrimental to these purposes. And the discussion, the Parks and Rec Commission, to move forward with the ordinance, total ban of smoking in all the parks. And some of the secondhand smoke dangers, side stream smoke that comes from the end of a lighted cigarette, pipe, or cigar, mainstream smoke, which that is exhaled by a smoker. When non-smokers are exposed to secondhand smoke, it's called involuntary smoking or passive smoking. Non-smokers exposed to secondhand smoke absorb nicotine and other toxic chemicals just like smokers do. The more secondhand smoke you're exposed to, the higher level of these harmful chemicals in your body. And this is all coming along with the Great American Smokeout that actually was started November 18th of 1976. So there was no intention here, but our timing is really coming along with the celebration of the Great American Smokeouts. In the United States alone, each year, secondhand smoke is responsible for an estimated 35,000 deaths from heart disease in non-smokers who live with smokers, about 3,400 lung cancer deaths in non-smoking adults, other breathing problems in non-smokers including coughing, mucus, chest discomfort, and reduced lung functions, 150,000 to 300,000 lung infections in children younger than 18 months of age, which result in 7,500 to 15,000 hospitalizations. Increases in the number of severity of asthma attacks in about 200,000 to 1 million children who have asthma. More than 750,000 middle ear infections in children. So one of the main concerns is public places where children go are special areas of concern. Now the other side of it, and this hopefully is a sidebar of different ordinances preventing smoking, is that more people may quit. And when smokers quit, the health benefits over time, some of them are like following. 20 minutes after quitting, your heart rate and blood pressure drops. 12 hours after quitting, the carbon monoxide level in your blood drops to normal. 2 weeks to 3 months after quitting, your circulatory improves and your lung function increases. 1 to 9 months after quitting, coughing and shortness of breath decrease. Regain normal function in the lungs, increasing the ability to handle mucus, clean the lungs, and reduce the risk of infection. 1 year after quitting, the excess risk of coronary heart disease is half that of smokers. 5 years after quitting, your smoke risk is reduced to that of a non-smoker 5 to 15 years after quitting. 10 years after quitting, the lung cancer death rate is about half of that of a continuing smokers. The risk of cancer of the mouth, throat, bladder, cervix, and pancreas also decreases. So I think the Parks and Rec Commission came at it from a secondhand smoke and a leisure opportunities smoking deterrent, but there are many additional positives that could come out of that as well. And I make a motion to approve the second reading.
Motion by Councilmember Orleans to approve the second reading. Mr. Davidson, you did not summarize the ordinance, but I assume from what Mr. Orleans is saying that this would be a total ban on smoking on all city parks.
That's correct.
Would this include parks like the Triangle and the Square?
All parks.
We have a motion by Councilman Orleans. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Eichelhardt. This time, is anyone in the audience wish to be heard on this issue? Hearing no comments from the audience, any further discussion by council? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a concern that I had voiced the previous reading of this ordinance about people who need to spend the day at the park with their children and so forth. And I still have that concern. I think it's a good idea to keep people from smoking where possible. I'm not a smoker myself, so that's not something that influences my decision. But I do struggle with banning it entirely when right now we have no ban whatsoever. So I would support having a limitation where we have people limited to just smoking in parking areas.
Are you proposing an amendment?
I was going to say, too, we do have Bob Greco from the commission here and Joe Glover. If anybody has any questions or wants to ask them any thoughts of where it came from.
That's really just a comment for now, and I'll let
Well,
others
we will be entertaining a vote. If you wish to we'll be voting on it without any amendments. If you wish, you could make a motion to amend it before that vote, or you could see if the vote fails to pass. That's your call. Councilmember Wynn.
wait.
I would like for Councilman Depolito to clarify parking areas, because we have some parking areas that's very close to the ball fields. We have on-site parking, on the streets. So are you suggesting all of the parking areas, or are you suggesting just take a section out of each parking area and that's where the smokers could be? Trying to get a feel of what you're trying to do.
Well, my thought was to have it limited just to the parking area so we don't have to define specific sections. I'd be open to that as well.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Councilmember Lori Henry.
Being a former smoker and living with a smoker, I have absolutely no qualms about restricting smoking. We've restricted it in our own home. My husband has to go outside and smoke on the deck, and doesn't matter what kind of weather, that's his designated smoking area. So I don't have any problem with reasonable restrictions, but I really find a total ban unreasonable. The other question I have is City Hall, because I know our Rec and Parks Department maintains City Hall grounds, and Barrington, Bullock, and Smith, are those all considered parks as well? We've got employees that use a designated smoking area. We've got park personnel that I'm sure need to use designated smoking areas. So I don't have any problem with restricting it reasonably, but I do have a problem, and I won't vote for it if we're going to restrict it wholesale.
Mr. Glover, when we say parks, could you give us a definition of parks? I think, I know that if it's, for example, our historic homes, are they parks? So what would be in Mill Village, the little pocket park, is that a park?
That is a park. City Hall grounds is not a park.
So what's the definition of a park under the way we're reading this?
The way that we're reading it is the parks that we maintain and take care of ourselves. City Hall was the exception when they asked us to maintain the grounds many years ago. But it's never been considered a park.
But y'all maintain the grounds of the historic home, so it's maintenance of the grounds would not be the definition.
No, not really. But
so what would the definition be?
Well, it's what's listed in our inventory and what's in everything that we have done in that sense. The properties we purchased as parks. It's hard to give a good definition, I guess. But
well, we need to be careful that we know what that definition is, so that in passing this, if to be enforced, Maury says he's going to want to know what the definition of parks is to make it enforceable, and that's why I wanted to try to get a clarification. If we could say the inventory, if y'all have an inventory that says these are parks, that would be good enough. But does the ordinance make that clear, Mr. Davidson?
Joe, do we have a listing of our parks in the annual report for the park?
Yes, sir, we do.
And would that be a basis for defining all the parks?
It could be a basis for it. We also have other documents that have it in there. All of our accreditation files, everything in that is included in in listed inventory that way.
Basically, it would be all the land area that we use for leisure sports that the Park and Recs Department maintains, except for the City Hall grounds.
Yes, sir. All the active and passive areas that we maintain as parks. We can list those, and we can have it listed in the ordinance if that would be necessary.
Mr. Davidson, what's your advice?
The more defined you are, the better. So I would recommend listing them all in the ordinance if you're going to approve it that way.
Can we pass an ordinance tonight and then refer to a list and get it passed tonight, or is that going to take another reading?
You can amend it to include the list tonight, the list that's in the accreditation, and we could just attach that as Exhibit A, if that's what the council wishes to do.
I Mr. Orland, do you wish to revise your motion to clarify what the parks are? I'm just trying to get past this point. I know there was a question of what are the parks, and I just trying to get a. Are you comfortable with saying the parks as listed in the accreditation as being the list of parks that your motion would apply to?
Joey, yeah, I think that would work for us.
Mr. Eichelhart, are you comfortable with that? Further discussion? Councilman Eichelhart.
Well, obviously, I agree with the.
Moved over and I forgot know which mic is what. Obviously, I agree with the total ban. However, I can support a designated area, but I do have a problem with just the parking lot because I would think that when people come away from events, that that's a time people are likely to light up as they come from having not smoked for some period of time. They get in their car, get in the parking lot. At the same time, you're going to have these kids that we're worried about supposedly doing this that are going to be in that same parking lot. So it seems to defeat the purpose. In fact, it probably increases the likelihood they would be in the same place as the smoking. So, I have a problem with that. I'd prefer it just be total, but, I could live with a designated area somewhere. But the parking lot doesn't seem to make sense to me for that.
Other comments before we take a vote? Councilman Orleans.
So I don't know if you or Bob want to add any thoughts about the designated smoking area and the conversations you had. I mean, it is a very difficult thing to define in the entire park system. So if you have any thoughts you want to share with us before we go further.
Just out of curiosity, what if we just said you could only do it in handicap parking spots? I'm serious. They could just walk over. You're trying to get a clear definition, and they're usually empty. And even if they're not, I know. But
what if they drive their car in there and say that?
I'm just looking for a solution.
What if they drive their car into that slot and then they tell the policeman that we told them they had to be there to smoke?
You could they've always got that little aisle next to the big ones. You could stand in that little aisle. Just a thought.
Mr. Mayor, this is why the commission went back to the total ban, because nobody could come up with a consensus of what a designated area is. And Bob Grieco, the chairman of the Recreation Commission, is here, and he can help answer some of those questions.
With regard to the designated area, the parking lot's a good example of that, but if you go from park to park, you'll see that in a lot of places, those parking spaces are right up against the playgrounds or activity areas. So we felt like just making a total ban is a stronger statement against smoking. And, if it was the council's direction for us to go back and look at a designated area, it would be possible we could maybe go and look at each individual park. But what we would prefer to do is to make the strongest statement and provide the safest atmosphere for all of the users of the park and create a total ban on smoking. And this is being done in a lot of other parks. Marietta, I believe, has already gone to a complete total ban. They started out with one park, and I believe they're going with all of them. And there's also a lot of other municipalities throughout the state of Georgia that are also going in the same direction.
Any further discussion before we take a vote? Council Member Price.
You had to think about that one?
She's not on my list yet.
I appreciate you saying member.
I'm trying to say Betty or doctor, but Price. Councilmember Price.
Well, in listening to Member Orland's discussing the problems with smoke in an individual, we can all agree with that, and certainly in my medical training, I would rather nobody smoked. However, I believe that our role on council is to follow the charge, which says basically the general health, not individuals' health, and then discussing where does the right of a smoker intersect with the right of a non-smoker to not breathe his secondhand smoke. And I think that's the issue we're discussing beyond just the general desire probably of most people that we have a smoke-free society. But just the same, smoking is legal. Person has a right to smoke, but they don't have the right, I don't believe, to infringe upon my clean air space. So I think it behooves us to find a place where that person can smoke, where he's not infringing upon another person's right to have clean air. Now, whether that be a certain distance away from people or in a designated area, I think that's where we need to go.
Any further discussion? If anybody wishes to make a motion to incorporate those things, we would entertain them. Right now, we're taking a motion on voting on a total ban. Councilmember Wynn.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also an ex-smoker, 16 years, and I know how difficult it is to be in any place that that you like to light up and you can't, and it's very difficult. But I also know, being an ex-smoker now, just how secondhand smoke really bothers me a lot now, and I can go to anywhere that this has smoking, and I can come out with a smoker's cough in an hour, and it's not good. I think there's some really pros and cons to all the arguments tonight. The problem is, how do we figure this out? I don't know if we can do this or not, so I'm going to ask Mr. Davidson if there's a way that we can defer this again, and see if there is a way that we can come up with some designated areas in the parks. And I agree with you that there are, because I've been in a lot of parks, and the parking is right up next to the playground or to the ball field. And if we say all the parking lots you can smoke, does that mean we're going to have 50 smokers there and the kids are walking through that smoke? And that kind of, that doesn't negates everything we're trying to do tonight. So is there a way that we can defer this without having to start all over again, to see if there's a way that we can bring in some type of areas that can be designated in these parks?
Mr. Davidson, can this be deferred?
The charter requires that after the first reading, it either be approved or has to start over again after 65 days. So the October 5th was the first reading, so 65 days is roughly December 8th, 7th, something like that. I don't know. So I think the first meeting in December is December 7th, so I think it might be possible. I would have to check it. I don't have a calendar.
December 1, yeah, so December 7th?
I think is the first meeting.
I mean, if this is what I'm hearing, because it sounds like a little bit of division here about which way we want to go. And again, I'm really leaning toward total ban of smoking, but I think there's been some good arguments tonight to kind of sway me. Maybe there is a way that we can just do certain, not the whole parking area, but certain designated areas. Of course, that's another thing that we have to look about, is how enforceable that is also. So my suggestion is maybe that we defer and say there is a way to do some type of designated smoking areas.
Do you wish to make a motion to defer?
Yes, sir. Motion
to defer by Councilmember Wynn to the first meeting in December. Our city attorney has advised us that we can defer and still vote on it without starting over again. We have a motion to defer. Do we have a second? Motion to defer, it will take precedence over that motion.
No, it doesn't.
Under the way I rule. Which has been our typical practice. If the motion to defer passes, we'll defer it without voting on this thing. That motion will stand and come back before this council. Do we have a motion to defer? Do we have a second? I don't hear a second. We have a second. We have a motion to defer with a second. Further discussion about the motion to defer. Councilman Orlow's.
Well, Bob, do you want the commission to come up with a designated smoking area? Because I was going to take a shot at it tonight. If you think you'd rather have the commission do it, and if you want to look at it park by park by park, you could do it that way. Or if you want to come up with a general approach, and if you do park by park, it's got to be well defined in each park. Isn't that right, Mr. Davidson?
I think that your ideas would be appreciated right now, regardless of how this vote goes. If there was not a total ban, what would your suggestion be?
Well, and that's the problem that I came with the total ban, because I've thought about this a million different ways. The commission's thought about it two different times, and there's no easy way to do it in all of our parks. Well, Councilwoman Price brought up the idea of a minimum distance, but you say you've got to be 100 feet from the person next to you that's smoking. Then our police officers are going to have to start carrying tapes around and doing it that way. So I guess if my fallback would be going right back to the automobile that they came in, because I don't know of how else to try to do it, because I think if you allow it in the entire parking area, that doesn't accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, one thing that you could do is you could paint something in a parking space saying that parking space or that sidewalk is you can have a box for smokers.
Well, that would be going back to park by park by park, because some parks don't have a parking plot.
And if you don't have a box,
space.
you can't smoke there. You could paint a box saying you could have a little cigarette, a little smoke coming out of it in the box. That's as an example.
For example, Don White Park is a park, and it's a parking lot next to the river.
It's all parking lot, right?
Every automobile space is within secondhand smoke distance of the fishing.
Yeah. And
some parks it may not be.
And the square has no parking whatsoever. I mean, it's you've got all kinds of different variations of it. That's why I went with the total ban.
Well, I'm just suggesting one option would be to say you can have a designated, either a sign. You have to be smoking within 10 feet of the sign post, or smoking in this box.
Something like the major, larger parks, we could try to find a designated area. With a lot of the smaller parks, just saying there's not enough room in.
If it is a small park, it's a simple matter. Let's take example the square. They walk across the little alley and they smoke. Mm-hmm. Or if it's at the triangle, they walk across the street in front of Go with the Flow and smoke on the. That's not solving the problem, but it's solving the issue. So maybe just in the larger parks, you have a designated parking space. In the smaller parks, it's a simple matter to walk off of that park in less time than it takes to smoke a cigarette. I'm not a smoker, but I'm looking for that. May be in the smaller parks. You say it has to be a designated place, and if there's no designated place, you can't smoke. Councilmember Henry.
I was just trying to think of what area of a park that you would normally not want to be in, and that's usually where smokers are relegated to smoke. And the only thing I could come up with are the dumpsters. So you could restrict smoking to the dumpster area of our larger parks, and they all have dumpsters, and they have them in various parts of it.
I'm willing to bet the fire department wouldn't like that.
Well, I park next to the dumpster every day, so and I won't. They can smoke next to my car over here at City Hall. Mr. Davidson had a suggestion.
I think it would be possible tonight to pass an ordinance if that's the pleasure of council, just saying that smoking would only be allowed in designated areas of parks as determined by the Roswell Recreation Commission, period. And then the Rec Commission could come up with those spaces, those areas in the parks or not in every park. And you could have the ordinance passed, and then it would be up to them to determine where those designated areas are.
Okay, I'll change my ordinance. I'll change my motion to that.
We have Councilman Nagelhard, is that amendment acceptable? Before we get this straight, Mr. Orleans, you want to rephrase your motion just to make it clear?
Excuse Mr. Mayor, don't I have to rescind my motion for deferral?
Motion to defer?
Yes, sir.
Let's make sure we get this thing, and then we'll come back to you. Let's see what it's going to look like.
I just want to make sure you can juggle this.
We can juggle it. This is easy.
Approve the motion, make a motion to approve the second reading as read, including a list from the accreditation filings for the city to identify the parks and allow smoking in designated areas as approved by the Parks and Rec Commission. Does that do it, Mr. Davison?
Is that acceptable, Ms. Nagelhard? Ms. Wynn, do you wish to withdraw your motion to defer?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will.
Mr. DiPolito, do you wish to withdraw your second? Mrs. Henry?
My question now becomes, are we delegating the authority to ban smoking in our parks to the Rec Commission because we're simply saying this council is not going to determine that. We'll let our Rec Commission determine it, and they will determine when, where, if, how people can smoke. So I personally feel like we're just handing this off to the Rec Commission. My vote on that motion would be no.
I hope that if this motion passes, the Rec Commission recognizes that the wishes of the entire council, and if the entire council, and if they put a total ban on, the entire council didn't like it, we could always bring it back. But I would hope the Rec Commission would take this as a directive to come up with a way to designate reasonable places where secondhand smoke would be minimized. All right.
Chair.
Councilman Orleans.
I was just going to say, Councilman Henry, I don't think we're giving them the whens. I think we're just giving them the option of identifying a designated spot, park by park, because they know their parks very detailed.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that we are basically passing it along to them. This board is not going to weigh in on this. We're just going to let them deal with it. So I won't support that. If we want to designate reasonable areas, I think we need to do that. I don't think we can assume that the Rec Commission is going to understand what reasonable is to us. I think that we need to either hash this out with this body or...
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
We're not likely to determine those spots by ourselves, certainly not tonight, unless we do a tour. What if we have it where they recommend what those sites are, they come back to us and we approve that? So then we do have the final say, and it's our vote on that. And then I guess the question, do we have to set a time limit for that to happen?
Kent, you're going to get to be known as the consensus builder. You keep this up.
Well, we already found out pigs fly.
Mr. Orleans, does that sound a reasonable approach?
Hey, I'm reasonable on anything because, as I said, I have thought about this a million different ways, and depending on who you're talking to, somebody can come up with an argument for or against, and it's trying to accomplish overall what I think is good for the city and good for people exposed to secondhand smoke, and then just a matter of tweaking that little bit. So I am in favor of however we can deal with it, getting 6 minds together on it, because I know we all have a different opinion on it.
What I'm seeing is that if we can have a motion that says we'll pass a motion to allow smoking only in designated areas, and that would be subject to a recommendation by the board and a final approval by the council.
Yeah, they're subject to approval by the council. Mr. Davison, this would be the similar fashion that we do for fees and other things where, we put it in the ordinance that it would be approved by the council. Is that?
Yeah, and if you put in there that it's approved by resolution of mayor and council, I think you're fine.
Okay.
I think we understand the motion.
Change the wording to include resolution by mayor and council on the approval of what's presented by the Parks and Rec Commission. Is that right, Sue?
All right, Mr. Eichelhardt, is that amendment acceptable? Back to Councilmember Wynn. Did we ever dispose of your deferral? Yes, we did. So deferral's out of the way. We now have a motion with, I'm not going to try to rephrase it, but I understand it. And it'll be subject, the final designation of smoking spaces will be subject to final approval by the council. We have a motion by Councilman Orleans, a second by Councilman Eichelhardt. All in favor raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Good job, Councilman Eichelhardt, building that bridge. This time, we'll call upon Councilman Eichelhardt, Administration and Finance Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next item, and I'm not going to read this exactly like it says, but it's more fun to read. Approval of budget amendment to amend the amended budget. That's basically what it says. So amend. So let's try that, and you can explain this to us.
What this is, as we talked about in committee last week, there's some items we'd like to carry forward into the 2010 budget, and a couple of new items just to go through this real quickly. The Community Development Department, we're adding about $290,000, the majority of that being for contractual services, including the comp plan update, the street center lines, E911 addresses and aerial photographies, and additional funds for our vacant houses. Environmental Public Works, an additional $125,000 for emergency stormwater repairs that came as part of the September flooding. Fire department an additional $80,000 of fireman's fees, and this is coming out of the savings from last year's money that was not spent. And in the police department, there's money for some promotions. There's $80,000 for the radio agreement, and then there's also payment for inmate medical treatment.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak?
Please.
On the $80,000 we talked in committee, this was half a year's fee for our use of the 800 megahertz radio system provided by Fulton County, and I received a letter from Angela Barrett, the Emergency Communications Department Director, stating that they would like full payment by December 31st because Fulton County's fiscal year is January 1. So we just received that information. I did speak with her today about the issue of there not being a lot of time to deal with it, but that is the edict that has come from Fulton County, so staff would need to request that we increase that $80,000 by an additional $80,000 for $160,000 to give us a full 12 months payment for participation on the system. And we are still verifying the inventory, so that is an estimated amount, but we believe to be very close to the specific amount. You will be seeing the memorandum of agreement in December. This is just putting the funding in place. We would not make a payment until you actually approve the memorandum of agreement, which is under review by legal.
Do we have a choice?
Not at this moment, no, sir. We are looking for other alternatives. Public safety has been looking. I've had discussion with both chiefs about what our options might be, and while we certainly need to have our radios intact and working on the system, we are exploring other options.
Are we looking at other options in conjunction with the other North Fulton municipalities?
Yes, sir.
I think that would be a great solution. Councilman Orr?
Couple questions. And the original $80,000, was that for intended to be our budget year of July to December?
Well, January to June.
So that was intended to be their half of their
Correct.
budget year, January to June.
Correct.
So we've always paid in advance of.
We have never paid. That's the issue.
Oh, no, that's right.
Correct. Yeah, they're just now coming up with this, and so they're trying to work out all of their details and kinks, and they're probably under a timeline requirement to get things in for their budget, and they're maybe not quite as organized as we would hope that they would be with this initiative.
What are the other North Fulton cities doing?
Making the payment.
They don't have a choice either.
Correct. I mean, if we don't make the payment, then they will discontinue our service, is what I was told today by the director. Now, obviously, they might not do that on day one. I did ask about the possibility of an extension. She does not have the authority to grant that extension. The commission would have to do that. We have to pay it, so it's now or later. And we were, from a staff perspective, we were just trying to put in place the full funding, so we're not coming back again and doing another budget amendment, but it's certainly the pleasure of the council as to how you would like to appropriate the funding.
Other questions? Do we have a motion?
Well, apparently I have to amend the budget amendment to amend the amended budget.
Yes, sir.
But it's not an official amendment. It's just that what we just said. So
You've been
the
thinking
numbers.
about that this whole time?
I've been waiting for that all day. So the numbers would be $160,000 on the radius agreement. Then the total number would now be $819,000, correct? And the
$341 for the general fund, yes, sir.
And then the new total is $9,150,771.24. Correct. All right. I move for the approval of that amendment.
Motion by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Nicolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Passes unanimously. I would encourage K-Love and our police department and our fire department to look at options in conjunction.
Excuse me, can you turn on your microphone?
Thank you. I apologize. I would encourage K-Love and our police department and our fire department to work with the other North Fulton municipalities to look for an option. I think if you get all of our police and fire departments and folks who are using radios together, we've got a lot of purchasing power. And I, for one, would rather to operate independently of Fulton County. Public Safety, Councilmember Lori Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item on our agenda this evening is the approval of a resolution to accept a 2009 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Award from the U.S. Department of Justice in the amount of $4,340. Chief Williams.
Thank you very much. This is a grant that we get every year. We've been fortunate to get this grant every year, but Council's also always fully funded our Bulletproof Vest program. Each year, we fund enough money to replace the vests that have gone out of warranty. So we would need to do this regardless of whether a grant existed. We did get the grant again this year for the stated amount. It is a 50% match. The money is in our budget to make that match. We'd appreciate your favorable consideration.
Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Motion for approval by Councilmember Henry. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Price. Anyone in the audience have questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Passes unanimously.
The last item on our agenda is the approval of a resolution to accept the 2009 Justice Assistance Grant from the U.S. Department of Justice in the amount of $23,958. Chief.
If you approve this, the acceptance of this grant, we would apply this money towards radio digital upgrade. We just talked a little bit about radios, of course. This would provide for a digital upgrade. This is also something that we would have to do with local funding, and if not for the federal grant. So we appreciate the opportunity to bring those monies to bear and save our local tax dollars by $23,958.
Move to approve.
Second by Councilmember Warren. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. We have a matter of litigation to discuss. We have a motion. We have a motion for personnel and litigation discussion. Motion by Councilmember DiPolito. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Lori Henry. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We have a work session in room 220 at this time. It's Kumbaya time.